Our next presenter is the
Wait a minute, what's this?
What's the matter?
Owen Hart, Slammy Award winner.
Woo! I did it again! And you know what?
No. You're presenting this.
You gotta be thankful, man. Owen spent a whole year of his life promoting this crummy show.
I did it again!
Yes!
And I have nobody to thank. Once again, I did it all by my sweet little self. 2-time Slammy Award winner. I knew it. I'm a winner. I did it. Woo! Hey, Bulldog, you may have 2 titles, but you don't have 2 Slammies.
Yeah!
And speaking of that, Vader and Mankind, this Sunday at WrestleMania, you're going to be in for the fight of your life because the Bulldog and myself, we haven't been better ever. And we're going to beat you and Mankind. And you know what, Vader? You don't have 2 Slammies like I do because you're losers and we're winners. Me and my Slammies.
Hello again, wrestling fans, and welcome to a very special edition of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. My name is Jay, and I'm, of course, as always, joined by my tag team partner, Tyrone. Tyrone, how the heck are you, bud?
I'm excited, man. I'm excited to kind of get off the normal beaten path that we would do every week. And today we're gonna switch it up. We don't have any real notes. We have bullet points on what we're going to talk about, if I'm not mistaken, but it's just literally going to be 2 friends potentially cracking a cold one and talking about the one and only Owen Hart.
Yeah, this is great. I've been looking forward to it for a while. I think that we have a lot of mutual memories. Both of us were growing up and in our formative years when we first started watching Owen Hart and becoming fans of him. And I think one of the first things that I'll sort of start off with that I always really enjoyed about Owen from a fan perspective, especially even as a younger kid, I started watching wrestling when I was 12 in 1996. And I remember always thinking that even though Owen Hart was supposed to be a heel, or at that time a bad guy, I always enjoyed his work. I always found him highly entertaining. I thought his one-liners were hilarious, his mannerisms. So it was really hard to sort of buy into him as a real monstrous heel. I mean, he did heelish things, but for me as a kid growing up, I always still thought he was pretty cool, even though he was going up against my heroes and my favorites. Like, what are your first memories and impressions of Owen Hart? Do you remember when you first saw him or how you felt about him at a younger age?
Well, I mean, I started watching a little bit before you. Like, honest to God, my first memory of the man is WrestleMania 5 as the Blue Blazer taking on Mr. Perfect. And I'm sure we'll touch on the Blazer gimmick throughout the show, but in the late 80s, it was dumb. I don't want to shit all over it, but it was a dumb character. He was kind of a superhero, kind of a luchador, but it was still Owen Hart, so, I mean, you're not going to hate on him. The in-ring spoke for himself. But talking about what you were saying about in the later 90s when he was playing a heel and not being able to hate him, Jay, that's because we're Canadian. We even though I'm not a big Brett fan, I can't hate the Harts. You can't hate the Harts. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA. We're not allowed. It's like not enjoying peameal bacon up here. We just can't do it.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that 100%, only because when I first started watching, I mean, I think I was aware that he was from Calgary. It didn't really resonate with me or make much of a difference. I was just more alluding to the fact that his presentation and the character he was playing was so highly entertaining. It's kind of like, to me, akin to The Rock in a way, that if you look at The Rock, he was a heel, but he was such an entertaining heel that eventually the crowd turned him face and obviously just enjoyed his entertaining character so much that they knew he was a heel, but they still cheered for him. And that's, I guess, kind of how I felt about Owen Hart in my beginnings of my fandom. was I knew he was a bad guy. I knew he was a heel. We had just come off of, the kick that caused Shawn Michaels to have that concussion in that amazing angle that they did on Raw back in November of 1995. So I knew he was a bad guy, but I still just found him so highly entertaining that I found myself having a hard time booing him.
See, you talk about the kick that took Shawn Michaels out. For me, there was a separate kick that was kind of the, oh my God, he is just a devious man. And that was when, to quote Owen himself, I kicked your leg out from under your leg, when he kicked Bret right in the goddamn knee at Royal Rumble 94 when he did that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, coming off of the whole Survivor Series 93, Owen being the only one eliminated on the Hart team. You see the distension within the family from that moment on. You get to the Rumble 94, where he and Bret are challenging the Quebecers for the tag team titles, and he takes Bret out at the end when they lose. And I know you're going to disagree with me on this only from what you watched growing up, but I personally think that 1994 really was Owen's year. Like, you look at, he did that at the Rumble. One of the greatest matches of all time, especially WrestleMania, with Bret at 10, winning the King of the Ring, challenging for the title at SummerSlam. Like, 1994 was Owen Hart's year, as far as I'm concerned.
No, you'll get no argument from me. I agree with you. I think that in terms of career years, that would likely be it for Owen. Not to say that he wouldn't have tremendous success going forward, but I think if nothing else, rather, the 1994 year really cemented Owen as a real player in the business as opposed to being Bret's brother. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let everybody know today, you kind of alluded to it earlier, Tyrone, our format today is more kind of fast and loose. We're just going to talk about Owen. We're going to talk about memories and matches and angles and personal memories that we might have from maybe shows we attended and things of that nature. So there's going to be a lot of bouncing around today, folks. We're not going to be following a chronological format. So, like, right now, we're talking about 1994. And I actually think this is the perfect place to start. So I don't know how you feel about this, Tyrone, but why don't we just dive into it and just dive into 1994 and talk about some of our favorite memories from that year. You good with that?
100%. I am good with that. But can we do one small thing before we do that? Now, when it comes to Owen, he is kind of known to be in 5 different tag teams. And I know we're going to touch on a bunch of his different tag teams and partners, but I want to give you 5 teams, and I want you to put them in order from your least favorite to your favorite, okay?
Okay.
I want to hear you, obviously, Owen and Bulldog, Owen and Yoko, Owen and Jarrett, High Energy, and the New Foundation. Where are we going at number 5?
Number 5. So number 1 being the highest, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so number 5 for me would probably be High Energy. And then number 4, I would go with the New Foundation. Then I'd go with Owen and Jarrett, Owen and Yoko, and then obviously Owen and Bulldog, which is my favorite tag team of all time.
See, I agree, but I'm not going to lie. I put Owen and Jarrett at 4 and the New Foundation at 3 because I really wasn't a fan of Owen and Jeff as a tag team. Also, by the way, folks, this is how Jay and our conversations actually are all the time. We'll say we're going to talk about something, and immediately we sidebar to something else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, I don't know about you, but I'm just having a big glass of water. I'm not even hitting the sauce this week. So, I'm having an adult vodka root beer pre-made that I'm thoroughly enjoying right now. Oh, I had just a regular A&W root beer today, so we are on the same page. But yeah, that's interesting. So, where did you have Owen and Yoko on the list? Sorry.
I kept Owen and Yoko in the same position you did at number 2, not necessarily because of their in-ring work or anything like that, but more so Owen's work in that tag team, constantly hugging Yokozuna, being the smarmy little shithead who got the big guy that always had it out for his brother too to be his tag team partner. Like, I thought it was just genius pairing the two of them together.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, really, what that did was it extended Yokozuna's career for an extra year or so. I mean, had Yoko stayed a single, say at the beginning of '95, well, they teamed up. Their first initial pairing was at WrestleMania 11, and Yoko was a mystery partner for Owen against the Guns. But I just think that had you not put them together, what would have Yoko been able to do really in '95 and '96? Certainly by the end of '96, I mean, I don't think it's any great mystery. You've talked about it before. You and I both agree that Survivor Series 1996 is one of the greatest WWF pay-per-views ever, if not my favorite ever. And seeing him at that event, I mean, I had never seen him that size before. I remember the last time I'd seen him before that was probably Monday Night Raw, the night after SummerSlam '96. He faced Shawn Michaels in a non-title match, I believe it was. And he looked huge then. And I didn't see him for several months. And then when I saw him at Survivor Series, holy cow, like, I don't even know how it's possible to be this size. So my point
I just remember, I think it was SummerSlam '96 free for all, him in Austin. Didn't they have to like get him out on a forklift or something when he broke his ankle?
No, there was a spot. It was a free-for-all match, and there was a spot where they gimmicked the top turnbuckle, and he fell backwards, and Austin got the pin in like 45 seconds because he was going for the bonsai. I guess he came in and ran roughshod on Austin for about 30 seconds. Then he threw him into the buckle and was getting ready for the bonsai, and then maybe it was 2 minutes or so. I don't remember exactly the time, but the thing with the forklift was a match or rather an angle on Raw with Vader, which happened about 2 weeks after WrestleMania 12, where Vader came in and attacked Yoko, and then he put his ankle on the bottom rope and did the Vader bomb 3 or 4 times and said they snapped the ankle. It was a way to get him off TV so they could both go down to Duke Medical Center and try to lose some weight because they weren't going to get licensed. And in that time, if you didn't get licensed by one athletic commission, it would kind of all the other athletic commissions would honor that. So you wouldn't, in effect, not be able to get licensed to compete anywhere. And they were at that point. Certainly Yokozuna was at that point where he wasn't going to be able to get licensed anymore. So anyhow, this is all saying this to be said that the reason why I think the pairing worked so well, other than the fact that they were a great pairing with chemistry, is just that it extended Yoko's run for an extra year. I mean, it's amazing to think where he had started Yokozuna, that is, in 1993, being the World Wrestling Federation champion, to where we are now 2 years later. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I kind of look at that pairing of Yoko and Owen as kind of a newer version of the Colossal Connection, because they did the same thing with Andre the Giant. Kind of gave him a little bit more mileage in his career by having him tag with Haku and win the titles. You look at their WrestleMania 6 match against Demolition, Andre never even gets in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the exact same thing. I know we're getting way off course on our Owen Hart show talking about the Colossal Connection, so let's wrangle it back in and get back to 1994, shall we?
Yeah, no, this is the whole point of it, bud. Is like, this is why we're format free this week, folks. We're going to be gushing all things Owen Hart and things that relate to Owen Hart. We will get off track a little bit here and there, but that's kind of the fun of throwing out the script for a week. So we hope you enjoy our offering. But as Tyrone alluded to, we are going to get back on track here just briefly and get on to 1994. 94 was an incredible year. I mean, we just talked about it. You had that angle at Survivor Series 93. And then, of course, the Superstars packages, after the holidays and going into 1994, you had Brett and Owen talking about how they patched things up over the holidays, and they were all on the same track. In fact, Brett even went on to say that he was just going to be a tag wrestler for the rest of his career. If he could tag with his brother, that's enough for him. And then, of course, we get to the match of the Royal Rumble with the Quebecers, and you can take it from here, my friend.
Well, it was set up to be the perfect angle. You've got the brothers coming in, trying to take the tag team titles from the evil Mounties, and they lose. And Owen gets frustrated, and he literally just kicks his leg out from under his leg. I love that line so much, so I'm going to say it as many times as I can.
Yeah.
And it was so brilliant. It was the little brother literally snapping on the big brother. And I am the big brother. I know you're a little brother, so I'm sure you might have had moments in your childhood where you wanted to do that to your brothers, but none of us did because we weren't on national television getting paid millions of dollars. But I thought it was great because it led into the Royal Rumble match itself, where Brett wasn't. It didn't look like Brett was going to compete, and Owen. I think Owen was in it as well. Was he not?
I don't recall. I don't think he was. Maybe he was. I don't remember. That's a good question. That's a really good question.
But it led to Brett. It led to Brett winning the Rumble, and then Owen constantly challenging him. And we would always see those interviews of Brett sitting in a locker room or sitting by a park somewhere, saying that under no circumstances will he ever fight his own brother. What did they end up doing?
Yeah, well,
they ended up fighting each other. And they made magic though when they got in the ring together.
100%. Sir, I didn't mean to speak over you there. I was just going to say that the only thing I was going to say was with 94 that actually it was Brett and Luger who actually tied the winning the Royal Rumble that year. And actually, yes, Owen Hart was one of the participants in the 94 Rumble. He was entrant number 5, and he was eliminated by your favorite and mine too, Big Daddy Cool Diesel. So. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting to see how all the pieces were set up. Like this was a incredible chessboard that they had set up for 1994. And where do you land on this particular feud in terms of it being, the family dynamic? Do you think that this is the best ever sort of family feud in wrestling history, or the best brother on brother kind of feud?
Are we talking like real brothers only, or kayfabe brothers as well?
No, I just think you can conclude the Undertaker and Kane and all that kind of thing. I think it's just any kind of angle that's presented, whether it's kayfabe or not.
Yeah, I think it is. The only thing that's and this is gonna sound really dumb on my behalf, the only thing that might rival it was Vince and Shane's rivalry over WCW in 2001. I thought that was good. But yes, Brett and Owen, hands down the best brother versus brother rivalry, because we've had the Hardys go against each other, and to me, they were never great matches, except for maybe the final deletion or whatever that crazy thing was. You've had the Dudleys go against each other. Nobody cared. Undertaker and Kane, to me, have never actually put on a fantastic match. They've had great storytelling, but when they get in the ring, it's usually not that great. I can't even think of anybody else right now. Drawing a blank. But yes, so short answer, yes, this is the best one.
Yeah, I can't argue. I will, just with the Undertaker and Kane, say that I do think that they had some decent matches. I do also think that storytelling plays a big part into it. I mean, this is a wrestling fan's dream, 1994, Owen versus Brett. Simply for the fact that you had two guys that were exceptional in-ring workers. And on top of that, the story that was told was so exceptionally done that you really had just a career angle, a career moment for both of these guys. It wasn't going to get much better for either one of them in terms, you're working with your actual brother and you are performing this incredibly compelling storyline. And the way it was booked, it was almost the perfect angle. This is long-term storytelling. We're in an era now where we don't get these kinds of angles or stories, or certainly not for this length of time. So looking back on it, it's got to be number one, with The Undertaker and Kane, in my mind, being a close second. You're not going to get the same in-ring, but the storytelling was phenomenal for that as well.
Well, and I don't know if you remember this, but the build-up for WrestleMania 10, do you remember how we got the Brett and Owen match exactly? With the coin flip?
No, I don't.
So, because Luger and Brett both won the Rumble, they were both getting title shots. So Luger and Brett had a coin toss. If Brett lost, he would face Owen and then go on to face the winner of Luger and Yoko. If Brett won, he would face Yoko first, and then Luger would face Crush, and then go on to face the winner of the title match. So that's how the Brett and Owen match got on WrestleMania, according to the booking. It was because of a coin flip, and it was the best coin flip that ever happened.
Yeah, and then we got what we got as opposed to Luger and Crush, which would have been rough. Yeah, I mean, and that brings us right to WrestleMania 10. I mean, the first question I got to go with right now before we even get started on talking about WrestleMania 10. Name me your top 5 in order WrestleMania opening matches. I mean, this has got to be
Oh, Jesus, in order.
Well, not in order. Okay, you know what? Maybe not 5. Give me 3. Give me 3. Not even in order. You know what? Screw it. But there's no format. I don't need the order. Just tell me your 3 of the favorite opening matches that come to mind for you.
I'll go with this one. I'll go with the Intercontinental Triple Threat from a few years ago with Seth Rollins, The Miz, and Finn Balor. And I will go with... Oh my God, this is a lot harder when you put me on the spot. I don't have anything prepared, to be honest with you. Shit. Maybe... You know what? I'll also say Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship, just because it was a decent, hard-hitting match, and it was a big title match right out the gate, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, that's 100% fair. I mean, I would definitely put this one, Owen and Brett, and then I would have Daniel Bryan and Triple H, which I think is pretty darn close to this one in terms of how good it was. And then the third one for me, yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in the same spot as you in terms of trying to come up with one that I really think, yeah, I mean, maybe Cena Big Show just for the opening of WrestleMania. Oh, the opening of WrestleMania 20 was pretty solid. I mean, there are so many. It's hard to pinpoint, and I put myself on the spot here too. So I'm right there with you. But definitely, I mean, I think the argument can definitely be made that this is one of the best opening matches in not even only WrestleMania history, but just pay-per-view history.
I don't know if there's an argument. Like, to be perfectly honest with you, to me, this is the best. And if you don't agree with me, go back and watch this match.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the match going through it, it's just a clinic. It really shows what both men are capable of. And it also shows that because you see them separately so often elevating other talents, not that they're always working with people they need to elevate, but when you see the two guys that are really at the same level, it's incredible to see what they're able to accomplish in the ring. There's no wasted motion. Every movement is telling part of the story. So it's just a tremendous way to, first of all, get the crowd going. I mean, this angle had already been going on for the better part of 6 months at this point. So the crowd was dying to see it. It was such a hot way to start the show. And really, if you look at this show, WrestleMania 10, it's remembered for 2 things, really. It's remembered for this match and then, of course, the ladder match with Shawn and Razor. And if I had a choice of watching one or the other for the rest of my life, or if I had to delete one out of history or what have you, it would definitely be that I would want to see this match and I'd want to keep this match. The Shawn and Razor thing was incredible. Don't misunderstand me, but just for me and my taste in wrestling, I think this one's far superior.
1000% I agree with you. Not only was it a fantastic match, the storytelling in it was great, but the finish of it was perfect. Just, it pretty much was out of nowhere. It was a smart, scientific wrestling move to end. It was Owen using his brain, and the smart thing was done. You give Owen the rub because you're going to have Brett win the title later that night anyway, so it's not hurting Brett to lose to Owen. If anything, it's skyrocketing Owen.
Well, basically what you're doing is you're setting up the number one contender for after he wins the championship. I mean, you get Yoko doing getting the obligatory rematch if that's what you want to do. And then from there, you already have a built-in challenger. Like, you're ready to go with this. Owen's got the upper hand. He's beat the man that would become champion on the same night he became champion. You have Brett going for the victory roll. Owen reverses it, holds him down, and gets the pin. You're not going to get much better than that in terms of, again, this is all about storytelling. It's incredible. So absolutely, to your point, it wasn't going to hurt Brett at all.
And even the look on Owen's face when he won, it was almost that of shock. Like, he couldn't believe he did it. But then, goddamn, did he cut some fantastic promos about how I beat you, Brett. I beat you. It was so great. And then even at the end of that night, you had Bret Hart win the title. All of these superstars are coming out. You got Randy Savage, you got Lex Luger, you got 1-2-3 Kid. They're all coming out, hoisting him on his shoulders. Owen just walks into the walkway and just kind of stares. That's all you needed. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to look. And it was perfectly done.
100%. 100%. And, there's a lot of other moments. This feud, to me, there was a couple of more moments in 94, and then I guess we'll probably move on to something else, because they did have an ongoing and reoccurring sort of rivalry that would last for a couple of more years after this. You could always count on putting Brett and Owen on a Raw main event, or having the main event a house show, or a Superstars, or what have you. You could always count on that being a spectacular match, and the rivalry was so ingrained in the audience at the time that you really didn't need to have to do a lot of storytelling. It'd be very easy for the commentators, whoever they might be, to catch the crowd up on what's going on, catch the audience up on the reason they're having this match, and always allude to the sibling rivalry and things of that nature. So before we depart onto other portions of Owen's career, I just did want to talk about the SummerSlam 94 match. I mean, of course, King of the Ring happened, and Owen went through and became the 1994 King of the Ring winner, which was a huge moment in his career. But for me, I think maybe my favorite match of the rivalry was this SummerSlam cage match. What are your memories of that?
Oh, I agree. It was the best match of the rivalry. Like, it was Big Blue, which I've always preferred that cage. I love it. It's a spectacle to see. It was something that you weren't seeing anywhere else, because everybody else was using the chain link fence ones that eventually they would start to use as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're great too. But there's just something about Big Blue that reminds me of my childhood, and I love every second of it. But getting back to Owen and Brett, like, them in that match was fantastic. Another incredible finish with them both climbing out and Owen getting caught with his foot and hanging upside down, and Brett jumping down to get the win. It was so perfect. Like, Owen was that close, legitimately within a hair of becoming the champ. And it didn't happen. I don't know why they never put the strap on him, but it's okay to me that they didn't. He didn't really need it. It's a fantastic match. I'm going to let you speak about it, but I also do want to touch back on King of the Ring before we move on, okay?
Yeah, well, why don't you, let me just talk, I'll get into this quick, and then we can go backtrack, not a problem. So I think the biggest sticking point for me in terms of SummerSlam 94, the Brett and Owen cage match for the title, is that it was such a departure from what cage matches typically are. I mean, even Bret Hart said it himself that, typically cage matches are these bloody massacres that have a lot of, blood and guts and things of that nature. So I really appreciated the fact that this was like a technical wrestling match in a steel cage, with a lot of high spots, a lot of high flying on Owen's part. And of course, the technical expertise, ground and pound, grind it out kind of style that Bret Hart had at the time. So, I mean, the thing that always comes to my mind when I think of this match is the suplex off the top rope, the top of the cage. That's the spot that always, when I think of this in my mind's eye, that's what I always think of. And I had a lot of appreciation for the fact that they were able to execute this kind of match inside of a steel cage, not to take away from, the blood and gore of a steel cage match. Not all cage matches are like that, but more often than not, they are. They're a blow off to a pretty major angle or feud. So I understand it completely. And I enjoy those matches. But this was such a departure. It was almost like an anomaly in terms of, it was like the eye of the hurricane in terms of cage match worlds where you got this one perfectly constructed cage match that was just, it was all about the wrestling and not about the blood and the gore. So I really appreciated that.
Not to mention this match didn't main event the show, which is crazy to think that we had that one Undertaker versus Undertaker match go on last. Can you imagine being the Undertaker and having to follow this? Or even worse, can you imagine being Underfaker and having to follow this? It's ludicrous to think.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were at a point where this is the first time Undertaker would be back since Royal Rumble 94. So he had been off for about 8 months, so it was a big deal, obviously. But I think probably that everybody, I mean, I don't know how the fans were because I wasn't watching at the time. You could probably speak to it better than me, but I certainly can't see it being something that people really invested in. I mean, maybe 1994 with the kind of characters they had on television, maybe people bought into it, but I mean, I don't know how you follow that cage match. To your point, it's too bad because nobody remembers that like Undertaker match. I mean, if you look at SummerSlam '94,
oh no, people remember it, Jay, just not for good reason. I was 8 when that match happened, and as an 8-year-old kid, I bought into the whole Undertaker shit, Undertaker versus Undertaker. I was stoked, but now at almost 35. I am more interested in watching that Bret Hart versus Owen Hart match than ever watching Bryan Lee versus The Undertaker again. It was just ridiculous. They had Leslie Nielsen and I can't remember the other actor's name from the Naked Gun movies coming in and doing a whole, oh, we're on the case, we're going to find The Undertaker. And they always would like just miss him. They went around to different businesses and shops in America being like, oh, The Undertaker. Yeah, he was in here getting 2 scoops of strawberry the other day. No, he wasn't. Don't insult my intelligence, you dumb motherfuckers.
oh, jeez. Don't get hot about it. It's a long time ago.
I know, but they're still doing dumb shit. Zombies were on the last show. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm not even. I can't even. This is why I do this show with you. Bottom line, this is why I mean, other than the fact that you and I are buddies and we love talking about old wrestling, this is my wrestling outlet now because I can't even. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, King of the Ring 1994.
Yeah. So I like this one because if you were to be watching it at the time and be a fan, you 100% thought Razor Ramon was going to win this tournament. It seemed like it. Owen was just kind of there. He was building momentum. He had come off the WrestleMania win. We weren't at the SummerSlam yet. But Razor Ramon was being built up as essentially the number 2 babyface at this time. So it was like, all right, cool. Razor's getting it. Fed's kind of always been a babyface company. He's going to get it. Cool. Owen all of a sudden wins because we have Jim the Anvil Neidhart come out and attack Razor Ramon and align himself with Owen to reform the new foundation under a new name, obviously, or just no name, I guess. But I thought the pairing of Jim Neidhart and Owen Hart at this point was fucking incredible. And then Owen went on to cut the promo about being the King of Hearts, which I loved that nickname so much. I'm pretty sure he kept it going for, God, at least the rest of the next 3 or 4 years, probably until the Hart Foundation reunion. But my God, it was great. Owen is the King of Hearts. Incredible. Owen winning the King of the Ring tournament. Again, it's almost kind of following in the lines and paralleling Bret Hart's career. Bret did it the year before. Owen did it now, which leads us to the SummerSlam pay-per-view where Bret's the champ. And could Owen finally take it off of him? I think there are a lot of people out there then that thought it was Owen's time. Owen was going to win it, and they didn't put it on him, and I'm fine with that. But I feel like that's where a lot of people thought we were going. We were getting him completely following in Bret's career and trying to one-up him every time. What about you? What do you think of that?
No, I agree 100%. And I mean, this goes back. We've talked about it a couple of times already this episode. It's a story. I mean, every element of this, if you go back and through the lens of hindsight, like we are today, And looking at 1994 and this Brett and Owen feud, I think, I can't even say the argument can be made because I don't think there's an argument to it. I think that this is a perfect angle. It's a perfect story. There's nothing they could have done in my mind to make it better. It was so well executed, all the way down to a detail like that, like you just mentioned. Brett wins in 94 or 93. Owen wins in 94. I mean, it's just every element is there. And maybe as a fan watching it at the time, or maybe even when I was younger, I wasn't watching at the time, but when I was younger watching this feud unfold, I didn't really appreciate all the little details. I don't think I really even appreciated all the little details until you and I started talking about it now. In the last 10 minutes, I've just thought, holy cow, this is a perfect angle. It's a perfect story. It's not going to get better than this. So I'm 100% with you. I mean, this year for Owen, you said at the beginning of this that you thought I wouldn't agree with you, that this was Owen's year. I come 100% agree with you. This was Owen's year.
Yeah, and it's not like Owen didn't have more years afterwards. He just may not have been in the title picture or in the main event. He still had things going, and he was still one of the backbones of the company, and we'll get to that. But as far as 94 goes, I'm not going to lie, Jay. I don't have a Wikipedia or a computer in front of me right now. I'm doing this on my phone today. I don't know what he did at Survivor Series 94. I think he was part of something called the Teamsters. It was him, Neidhart, Jeff Jarrett, Road Dogg, and maybe one other person, but maybe Diesel, actually. If I just rattled that off by memory, then I need to cool it on 90s wrestling, I guess. But, I mean, again, Survivor Series in this era, to me, 93 to 94, 95, 96. Sorry, not 96. We've already spoken about that. I liked it, but you weren't settling a lot of feuds at the time, unless it was a championship fight. You were just getting a lot of teams thrown together for the sake of teams being thrown together. So to me, Survivor Series 94 isn't even really on my radar right now.
Well, I would just include it only because we had that Bob Backlund Bret Hart submission match in which Owen convinced Helen Hart to throw the towel in the ring after Bulldog.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was the pay-per-view, because I have written down in my notes here just simply throwing the towel in.
Yeah.
And I thought that was in 95, so my bad. Yeah, let's talk about it then.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. It's hard to remember everything. Again, folks, we're not really working on off a format this week. We thought it would be fun for us to just kind of have a conversation like we would on the phone, like Tyrone alluded to, or if we're in person, having a couple of cold beers, maybe a shot of Jack Daniels or two. But no, this is fun for us. So we appreciate you hanging in there with us. And as far as this match goes, I mean, it added a lot of fuel to the fire. To me, at this point, with the Owen and Brett rivalry, it kind of we've seen the climax. To me, the climax of it would have been sort of SummerSlam 94, and then maybe some rematches thereafter. But at this point, they had both kind of moved in different directions. But this kind of goes back to what I was alluding to before in terms of you can put Brett and Owen together at any time in the next couple of years, and you're always going to have that story to go back to. So this, to me, even though they weren't necessarily as closely associated in terms of angles at Survivor Series 94, I remember they had several matches in the early part of 1995, and even back through all the way through 1995. So when you have these kinds of moments that add fuel to the fire, it's incredible to see how you're able to go back and draw off of that story that's been so well told. And then, of course, from there, you got into the Bret Hart and Bob Backlund stuff going through until spring of 1995. So, but again, this is a testament to Owen's incredible performance and incredible ability to play all kinds of different emotional chords. You see him pleading with his mother and father, and Stu's shaking his head. No, there's no way we're gonna throw in the towel for Brett. And during the match, Brett was in that cross-faced chicken wing from Bob Backlund for probably the better part of 15 minutes. I think it was 15 minutes. At least it feels like it was. And then you have Helen, who's sitting there, gasping at the horror of seeing her son in this tremendous pain. And then finally, Owen starts crying and pleading with his mother. And then his mother just finally grabs the towel and throws it. And Stu Hart's trying to stop it. It's like I can see it in my mind's eye as we're talking about it now. And then, of course, Owen starts celebrating. And then the parents realize that they've been had. And it's just incredible storytelling. I mean, that whole Hart angle, the Hart family angle in the mid-90s was just so masterfully done.
Because that was Davey in Brett's corner originally with the towel, right? And then he became incapacitated somehow, knocked out or whatever. And then that's when everything turned into Owen pleading with Helen and Stu, correct?
Yeah, I think Owen tripped him and he fell into the ring steps and was knocked out. And that's when I guess Backlund got the upper hand, and then Owen was there trying to beg and plead with Helen and Stu to throw in the towel, and then eventually Helen did. So yeah, and it was it wasn't overacting. It wasn't. I mean, maybe a touch, but it wasn't hammy. I found his portrayal and performance, Owen's that is, in that moment, seemed very sincere. And obviously, there's layers to that. When it's an actual family member, you're able to draw things emotionally when you're performing. So I think that there was an air of realism to it. And, with the crowd being what it was, the WWE audience as a whole, WWF at the time, wasn't as educated about the product and the goings on behind the scenes as people are now, or even would be a few years later. I definitely feel as though there probably were a lot of people that were watching that thinking, oh my God, like, yes, save Brett, help Brett. Thank God you finally seen the light. And then turns around and slaps everybody in the face. It was just excellent.
Yeah, I think it was kind of the perfect way to end 94 with Owen, was him just being a smarmy little brother who weaseled his way into getting his parents to get Brett to throw in the towel for Brett, when who knows if Brett would have submitted. I mean, like you said, he was in that move for a while. Davey could have thrown in the towel. It could have happened before, but the finish of it was the perfect way to kind of end off 1994 for Owen Hart. He was still the chicken shit brother who pulled a fast one over on his family, and it kind of got him moved on into the storyline a little bit, because Brett and Backlund kept on, and Owen just kind of moved on to other things. And some of those other things I'm sure we're going to talk about. But really, when you think 95 Owen Hart, we kind of talked about it already. You think the Yokozuna tag team and the mystery partner, do you not?
No, 100%. I was just going to say that we've kind of almost, again, by virtue of us bouncing around in the conversation, it's so typical of our usual conversations. It's why I usually having notes and a spine to follow is so imperative. Otherwise, we'd go all over the place. So that's exactly what we're doing today. And I feel like we've kind of already covered 95. I mean, to the extent that we've hit, Owen's biggest portion of 95 would be as the Yokozuna tag team. Of course, he had the formation of Camp Cornette with Bulldog in the fall of 1995, and Camp Cornette was such an influential stable in the WWF, which I loved. I know you did too, especially with the addition of Vader a few months later. And then, of course, the other big thing, maybe the biggest thing that Owen did in 95 was, as we alluded to before, Shawn Michaels had been attacked by several Marines at a bar in Syracuse, New York, back in October of 1995, which forced him to relinquish the Intercontinental title to Dean Douglas at In Your House Great White North, I believe it was called, in October of 1995. And then from there, we went on to Shawn Michaels being on the shelf for a while, came back at Survivor Series as a part of a wild card Survivor Series tag team match, which is alluding to what you talked about before, about being these teams being kind of thrown together. This one was kind of unique because it was heels and baby faces mixed together in the same teams, which was kind of different. But from there, we go to Owen Hart versus Shawn Michaels on Monday Night Raw. And I don't know how much you remember about this match, Tyrone, but it was an angle that was set up to kind of capitalize on the injury that Shawn had sustained from the Marines and in real life having been pummeled by these guys. So Owen Hart hits an enziguri kick and knocks Shawn Michaels out cold. And the story goes that I guess Shawn and Kevin Nash backstage were saying that Vince has to get off headset and has to go check. You have to go dead. You have to go dead air. And this had never happened on Raw before. No talking, because everybody's going to know it's an angle if that's the case. But if you have Shawn Michaels lying there in the ring, dead to the world, with Owen Hart kind of looking concerned himself, like this is not supposed to happen, and you have Vince McMahon in the ring checking on him, Lawler's not saying it on commentary. This was an incredible angle and something that was shades of the Attitude Era before the Attitude Era was a thing. So I don't know how much you remember about this, but it was a pretty big deal at the time.
I remember watching it. I don't want to say live because I don't know if we were able to get it live up here at the time, but definitely on the replay. And again on the Superstars recap on the weekend and the Live Wire and all the fun little shows we had on the weekend. And I remember watching it as a kid, not knowing what the hell was going on. Because this happened in the summer of 96, you said, right? Or the fall of 96?
This happened November of 95.
Yeah, okay. So November of 95, I was 9. So I didn't know, I had a feeling that wrestling wasn't real. I had a feeling that, or you know what I mean. We don't like to use the R word, but yeah. I also had a feel but when you see Fantismo going on Superstars and all of a sudden he's on the turnbuckle and then he's gone and he's vanishing. All right. That's again, insulting our intelligence. But at this point, yes. At this point, we had no idea. We had never seen an angle like this. It was ahead of its time. I don't know if we've really seen many since where something like this happened. It was really, really smartly done, and I feel like they don't want to keep going back to it to dilute it. They need to keep gimmicks like this completely strong, so if they go back to it, people will believe it again. The only thing that really comes to my mind of something where chaos just brought the end of the show was the debut of the Nexus. And again, that was obviously a scripted thing, but the way that they just tore the ring apart, beat up the announcers, Daniel Bryan got fired for choking out Justin Roberts with his tie on TV. That was that's the only thing I can think of where it's a chaotic, you have no idea really what's going on. Did these guys take some liberties? What, were they trying to put themselves over? It's the only thing to me that comes close to this finish.
Yeah. There's been a few moments on Raw that have left you wondering certain things. I mean, even I guess it's not quite the same, but even the pipe bomb promo. I mean, a lot of people thought that was a shoot. Oh my God, he's going off script and this and that. So that was another one. I remember the night after WrestleMania 31, Brock Lesnar destroyed the whole announce team, things like that. So there is precedent to it. I think the other thing too is that it wouldn't work today. I mean, that's the beauty of it. It was of its time. An angle like that with Michaels being prone in the ring. I mean, I guess in certain ways you might be able to get away with it today, but I also think that with our society being what it is and being a little bit more sensitive to these sorts of things than they were, say, 25 years ago or what have you, that I don't know that it would work as well these days. I think a lot of people would probably be offended by it or think that it was important.
Well, I think a lot of people would immediately think that it was a concussion or something like that. And with all the studies that have been done in this day and age, you don't fuck with concussions, man. You have known me while I've had a terrible one that kept me almost bedridden for 6 weeks. So we all know the dangers of head injuries.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If that's where, I feel like if that's something they would do now, everybody would think they were trying to make light of a concussion or a head injury to kind of benefit themselves, which would not be a good look.
Yeah. I suppose. I don't know if I necessarily wholeheartedly agree with that, but be that as it may, I think that the angle was of its time, and I do think that again it was well done because it was something that we had never typically seen on television. So this is my point of rounding out 1995 and bringing it home for Owen Hart was there's no better way for him to kind of close out his year by having this incredible angle that he is shot with Shawn Michaels that would then lead to interaction in the 1996 Royal Rumble. And then, of course, a match at In Your House, Rage in the Cage, which was right before WrestleMania 12. And Shawn would put up his championship opportunity to get a piece of Owen and all that kind of thing. But so this era was quite pivotal for Owen Hart. But I want to let you sit in the driver's seat for a couple of minutes here. Where do you want to go next? Like, what do you want to talk about? Where do you want to cover?
I don't really know much about his 96 run, to be honest with you. Is there anything in 96 that we should talk about, or should we just kind of get going with all the fun shit that happened in 97?
Well, I mean, we can bounce around to whatever, or we can talk about whatever year you want. I mean, 96, yeah, I would say that 96 started off pretty well for Owen. He had that match with Shawn. And then, of course, one of the biggest things in Owen Hart's career happened at WrestleMania weekend, WrestleMania 12, was when he became the Slammy Award.
Oh my God, the Slammies. Oh my God, the 2-time Slammy Award winning Owen Hart. How the hell did I not remember that? You know what? I think it's safe to say that was the highlight of 96 for him. Because he was in a match at Mania 12, and I know you probably enjoyed it. If I'm not mistaken, it was Camp Cornette versus Jake Roberts, maybe Ahmed Johnson, and Yokozuna. Was that the 6-man?
Yeah, and it's actually a lot better of a match than you probably remember it being. It was a really, really good way to get the show started with all the star power in the match. Plus, the crowd was super hot for it.
Oh, I'm not taking anything away from the star power, and I'm sure it was a good match. It's just when you look at the fact that you look at his WrestleMania 10, you look at his WrestleMania 11, you look at him headlining the pay-per-view the month before with Shawn Michaels. I don't want to say it's a demotion because it's WrestleMania and nothing about WrestleMania is a demotion. But he was kind of in the curtain jerker in a 6-man. Like, shouldn't he have maybe had a one-on-one feud with somebody or involved in the tag? I know we had the finals of like the tag team title tournament there with the Godwins and the Body Donnas. But couldn't the Bulldog and Owen have been in the finals of the tournament? Wouldn't that have worked too? I don't know. I just think it's kind of a strange place for somebody like Owen to be, considering he had just won 2 prestigious Slammy Awards and was the biggest guy in the company, if you ask him. And then he's opening the match with Jake the Snake Roberts. Like, no disrespect to Jake, but 96 Jake was not 86 Jake by any stretch of the mind. I know you're going to disagree with me hard on this, but that's just how I feel.
Well, no, the first thing I want to just say is that Owen won his first Slammy at, well, he didn't win it. He kind of stole it at the WrestleMania 12 Slammy Awards. And then the next year was when he became a 2-time Slammy Award winner by stealing a second one. So he became a 2-time Slammy Award winner in 97. As for his match at WrestleMania 12, I think that I would disagree with you in the sense that I don't think that it was a curtain jerker. I think that if you look at the way you structure a wrestling card, that so often the first match out is one of the most important matches on the card. I mean, if you're not going to be in the main event, I think a lot of times you want to be the first guy out there. You're setting the tone, setting the pace. The crowd's super hot and all that kind of thing. Plus, you have to remember, it's not all that dissimilar from what Owen was doing with Yoko. I mean, he was wrestling Yoko against him in this match. But he was in there to bump for a bunch of guys. He was bumping for Ahmed Johnson. He was bumping for Yoko. He was going around making these guys look like $1 million. I mean, yeah, Jake was probably a step slow at this point. He's in there taking care of Jake. He was the MVP of this match, and I think that he's probably the linchpin of why this match came off as well as it did. You had a lot of guys in there that, again, tons of star power, but other than Owen and Bulldog, I mean, of course, Vader was there too, but he had seen better days at this point. Owen and Bulldog were the 2 guys that were really, the stalwarts in this match that really brought it together. So I think that his place on the card was actually impeccable.
All right. We'll agree to disagree on this one. That's totally fair. I get what you're saying about if you don't want to be last, you want to be first. But I don't know if that mindset had really come into play yet at this time. Because you figure you're still doing matches with like Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Duke Drosy, or Hunter Helmsley and Henry Godwin in a fucking hog pen match, and I'm pretty sure that opened whatever pay-per-view that was on. And to me, that's not setting a tone. I know Duke Droese and Triple H opened a Royal Rumble because the winner was number 30 and the loser was 1. If we're not counting the free-for-all, then okay, whatever, I could be wrong. But I feel like the mentality of if you're not last, you want to be first didn't really come into play for a few more years at this point. Prime example, you go back into our archives and look at WrestleMania 2000, which happened, 4 years after this? You really think the opening match of The Godfather and D'Lo Brown against Bossman and Buchanan was setting the tone for the night? Unless you're setting the tone of it being a shitty pay-per-view, which I guess it kind of was, you're not really doing it at that point.
I think that there's different parameters. I think that The Godfather being as over of an act as he was in 2000 made sense for him to open the show. With him coming out and getting all the fanfare, getting the fans, getting the crowd super pumped for it. Was it the greatest match in the world? No, but it wasn't a bad match. You had D'Lo in there with Bull Buchanan, who could both work. Obviously, Godfather, Charles Wright, and Boss Man could both work. So I don't think it was a bad way to set a tone in terms of expectation of star power for the card. I get your point, though. Yeah, I mean, it's not always going to be the case that certain events aren't always going to have these barn burner opening matches. I mean, you're not going to get Brett and Owen at WrestleMania 10 for every pay-per-view opener. I get that 100%. And to your point, I think it did evolve to that going forward. It maybe wasn't necessarily at this time, but I think for the WrestleMania 12 match in particular, I think it was just a great way to emphasize star power at a time when there wasn't a ton of star power in the company. It was a down period for the WWF. We're a couple of months away from getting the NWO in WCW, and of course, the established stars, mega stars from the 80s and early 90s were all over there. So you didn't have super mega star status on the WWF roster at this time, and to to have an expose of all of your top guns at Mania makes a ton of sense to me. But anyhow.
All right, well, we're just going to keep agreeing to disagree on this one. So
Yeah,
let's move
no
on
problem.
to a different topic then. Let's talk about the main reason that you probably wanted to do this show, and let's talk about the tag team of Owen Hart and the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, who, for anybody who doesn't know Jay, this is Jay's all-time favorite tag team above any and all. He thinks they're the greatest. I'm not gonna tell him he's wrong because that's his opinion, and we're all entitled to it. I just personally wouldn't put them as the greatest. I don't even know if I'd put them in top 5, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's definitely my favorite Owen tag team, so I'll give him that. Jay, I'm just gonna let you talk about all your childhood lovely memories of everything to do with Bulldog, Owen, him sliding in front of Bulldog with the slammies trying to get on the camera. Just all the shit hijinks and great matches that these two had. What ones do you want to talk about in particular? Of them as a tag team, not them against each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. I'm not going to go through each and every one. I mean, the first match that I remember them being a tag team for actually was my first ever wrestling event I ever went to, which was at the WWE Experience, which was in Toronto at a place called C&E Stadium, was where the Blue Jays, the Toronto Blue Jays of the Major League Baseball, had originally played for several years before the Sky Dome here in Toronto opened. It was a big facility. I think there was about 23,000 or 24,000 people. So you can imagine that's a big gate in 1996 for a house show. It wasn't even televised. So they were there for that, and they were a tag team as members of Camp Cornette, and they took on, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Smoking Guns. This was right after the SummerSlam show. I believe it was the following weekend after SummerSlam, actually. And then from there, you'd go on to see the matchup between the Smoking Guns and the British Bulldogs at Bulldog and Owen, my apologies, at In Your House Mind Games, which was for the Tag Team Championship. And of course, they won the titles there. They would have a rematch the following month at In Your House, Buried Alive. they would have a match at Survivor Series and one of those traditional 4-on-4 Survivor Series tag teams matches, teaming with the New Rockers to take on an incoming Doug Furnace, Philip LaFond, and the Godwins. And then there was a lot of back and forth. They started to build some tension going into 1997 that there might be a potential breakup. There was some tension within the team. Actually, at the In Your House Mind Games, when they won the tag team championships, they were no longer managed by James E. Cornette. A different manager took over. Clarence Mason had sort of swindled Jim Cornette to sign over his contracts for the tag team to him. So he was a tag team manager as well as managing the Nation of Domination. All this to be saying that I think that their run
Now,
as a tag team.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second there and ask you a sidebar question, because that's what we do. Sure. Do you think the Clarence Mason character would have existed or gotten over the way if it wasn't for Johnny Cochran at the time?
I don't really think. Was it even over?
Okay, maybe not over, but do you think it would have existed or been given the push that it was if it wasn't for Cochran and the O.J. Simpson trial?
Probably not, but I will say that I think that his, if we're talking about Clarence Mason, probably his, the height of his run was when he was representing Bulldog and Diane against Shawn Michaels in those series of matches, when he was talking about alienation of affection and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that stuff was classic. So by this point,
see, when I think Clarence Mason, I think Nation of Domination immediately.
He didn't do anything in the Nation, though. He didn't even really speak that much. He was there, but Farouk did all the talking. So he was just kind of there. He didn't do anything. At this point, he didn't even... His main thing was... Then he managed Crush for a bit. He brought Crush back into the Federation in the summer of 96. He really didn't do a whole lot after the fall of 96. He was kind of done. I think he was even out of the company by early 97. But yeah, no, I think probably the Johnny Cochran thing played a lot into it. No doubt at all. But as far as Bulldog and Owen go, I mean, we have this incredible run of matches. They were getting guys over. They were getting incredible matches out of anybody that they were wrestling, and they were really making talents look a lot better than perhaps they were. The tag team division in 1996 was super stale. You really only had 4 tag teams. You had the New Rockers, you had the Godwins, you had the Body Donnas, and you had Smoking Guns. And that was really about it, other than the odd, Aldo Montoya and Barry Horowitz tag team, or I'm
pretty sure the Bushwhackers were still kicking around.
I was just going to say, yeah, they were still around at the beginning part of 96, I believe. But my point is that when you put Bulldog and Owen to the tag team equation as champions, you have all kinds of fresh new matchups. And yeah, I just think that they really elevated the tag team division at a time where they were floundering really badly. What are your memories of them as a tag team?
I don't clearly have the memory that you do with the Bulldog and Owen, but I don't know why when I think of them as a tag team, for some reason, Survivor Series 96 comes to mind. And I don't know if it's because they had such a great match when it was down to them and Furnace and LaFond, or if it's because it was Furnace and LaFond coming into the company and I was a big fan of them. But overall, when it comes to the Bulldog and Owen as a tag team, I don't really have a hell of a lot of things to talk about, to be perfectly honest with you. I know you think that they are the end-all, the be-all for your favorite tag teams, and that's great. I'm never going to argue that. I think that they're excuse me. I think that they're fantastic, but I don't put them on the same pedestal that you do. I think when it comes to the Bulldog and Owen, we need to speak about one thing and one thing in particular, and that is, as tag team champions, they fought in the finals for the WWF European Championship. It was a Monday Night Raw. It was from Berlin, Germany. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if this was meant to be a Raw all along. I think it was meant to just be a house show, but the cameras were there. and they just turned it into a Raw. I remember that Raw vividly. Like I remember actually I watched it, I want to say a month or two ago with my wife, and the opening sequence of that event has the Berlin Wall being torn down and how Vince McMahon is almost trying to compare the beginning of the European Championship to how the division of East Berlin and West Berlin happened with the wall coming down. And it was the most ludicrous insanity bullshit that Vince McMahon normally spills trying to get his talent over. I think that is the culmination of Bulldog and Owen to me, at least in this era, was them going one-on-one in, honest to God, Owen's top 3 to top 5 matches for me, for sure, going one-on-one with the Bulldog for the European Championship. Now, I know that you probably have a lot to speak about this one. So whenever you want to cut me off and just start spewing your love for Owen and Bulldog at the European Championship and that wonderful night in Berlin, go right ahead, my friend. I will let you take the mic on that one.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's not too much more in terms of the backstory that I can contribute other than what you kind of just laid out. I will say before we get off the tag team conversation that one of my favorites, or sorry, other two of my favorite tag team matches that Bulldog and Owen did have was WrestleMania 13. We had Bulldog and Owen versus Vader and Mankind. It was on paper a really, really cool sounding match. You had completely different styles in this match, which I really, really loved. And I know there's a lot of people that have gone back and forth on how they feel about it. Some people like it. Some people didn't think it was very good. It was a disqualification finish, or it might have been a count out rather finish. But if you go back and watch the match, which I did recently just to freshen my memory with some of these matches with Owen, this match is really good. It's really, really well worked. It's snug. It's tight. You get the power spots from Bulldog. You get the speed spots from Owen, which is not to say Bulldog wasn't an extremely fast competitor either. And then, of course, you have, them in jeopardy against these two monsters and these masked monsters in Vader and Mankind with Paul Bearer ringside. It was a really, really good match. And then the month later, they would wrestle in the opening match at In Your House, Revenge of the Taker, which is one of my top 5 favorite wrestling events ever. You had Bulldog and Owen defending the tag team titles against the Legion of Doom, which was another fun match. I think that the month's previous match with Vader and Mankind was better. But again, in terms of star power, Bulldog and Owen versus LOD, you can't go wrong with that. Those are some pretty solid marquee matches for tag team championships, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's the Road Warriors, man. The Road Warriors and essentially the Hart family. Yeah. It's royalty all around. That goes without saying. The Road Warriors in 97 may not have been what they were in 87, but they were still a name to draw money. They weren't getting the Road Warrior pop that they once got, but yeah, you put Animal and Hawk on a pay-per-view and everyone's going to tune in. Everybody just wants to hear, "Oh, what a rush." I know I did. But yeah, I think we're finally getting into 97, which other than 94 to me really was the year of Owen Hart as well, because they're gonna reform a fun little group there, right, Jay? There's 5 of them, I believe, in the group. Do you wanna tell us who those members might be?
The greatest faction in wrestling history, the Hart Foundation, absolutely. So we have just going back to the European Championship final, I just wanted to touch on that briefly. So this was all happening around the same time frame. The European finals happened at the end of February of 1997. Then we had the WrestleMania 13 match with Vader and Mankind. The Bulldog ended up winning the European Championship, but the story is the match. I mean, yes, we had been slowly building up some tension going back to the latter part of 96 through the Royal Rumble. Actually, Owen Hart eliminated Bulldog out of the 1997 Royal Rumble. Then we had Owen and Bulldog defend the tag team championships against Doug Furnas and Philip Lafon at In Your House Final 4, in which Owen Hart nailed I believe it was Philip Lafon with a slammy to get the disqualification when Bulldog was already kind of had secured the win with a power slam. So we had this tension building, and then this match finally happens. And if you watch the psychology of the match, it's indicative of the Brett and Owen in-ring psychology. It's so beautifully told, the story. They start off the match kind of showing each other respect, holding the ropes open for each other when one guy got knocked out of the ring and gets back inside. And then eventually the tempers flare and it becomes this clinic. I mean, I cannot express to you enough, for those of you listening, that if you've never seen this match, you have to go out of your way to see it. If you go to WWE Network, if you want to check it out on Daily Motion, wherever you might find it, watch this match. It is one of the most beautiful and well-executed wrestling matches I've ever seen. I still talk about it. It is now 24 years old, this match, and I still talk about it as if it happened yesterday. Every time it gets brought up, I get extremely excited about it. Tyrone, I know you've seen it a few times, and I know you enjoy it as well. But for me, this is one of those matches that again, much like the storyline between Brett and Owen, this in-ring match, it just doesn't get much better than this.
Yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me whatsoever. It's, as you said, it's a clinic. It's something that, especially if you are younger and maybe weren't born yet around this time or were really young at this time, you're just getting into wrestling, you somehow stumbled across our little show and you're hearing us talk about it, please go out of your way. It's maybe, a 15 to 16-minute match. It is glorious.
I think it's closer to
It is
half an hour,
incredible.
actually.
Okay, well, it's half an hour of your day. Put it on while you're having your coffee in the morning. Put it on while you're eating your breakfast. Put it on even if you can bring your iPad into the shower while you're in the shower. Just bring Owen and Bulldog with you. Why the hell not? I'm sure Jay does.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm not even gonna. Okay, let's move on. So, yeah, to your point, the Hart Foundation reformed in 1997, right after WrestleMania 13. We finally had this very heartfelt and emotional speech from Bret Hart, who came in to break up the fight between Owen and Bulldog. And we had this promo that Bret cut for about 10 minutes. And then finally we get the reformation of the Hart Foundation. And they were starting to run roughshod throughout the Federation. Going into the In Your House Revenge of the Taker, which would be the main event would be a rematch between Bret Hart and Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13 in that famous submission match. And Owen Hart and British Bulldog would be there to help make the save. Then, of course, as the weeks and months progressed, we would get Jim Neidhart join as a family member, and of course Brian Pillman as well. And we'd have those 5 members run through the Federation for the better part of the year. This was becoming one of the most pivotal angles of the late 1990s for the WWF, the Canada versus America angle, in which the Hart Foundation would be booed mercilessly in the U.S. by denigrating them on a weekly basis, and then go to other parts of the world, specifically Canada. It worked out that summer that we were having a schedule in which for many months we would have 1 week in the U.S. and the next week would be in Canada for Raw. That happened for, I believe, the better part of July and some of August as well. And then we would eventually end up at one of the most famous matches in wrestling history, specifically in Canada, which is that 10-man tag team match.
WWF In Your House Canadian Stampede right in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It was, it was a sold-out crowd. So there was probably, if I had to guess off the top of my head, somewhere between 11 and 15,000 people there. And of that, I would say 8,500 of them were Hart family members or their friends. Because when the Harts came out, not only was the building shaking, but I swear to God, if you go back and watch this event, your TV will shake just from the incredible amount of noise and stomping and clapping that these fans are making. And when the match ends and the Harts are victorious, every member of the Hart family is in the ring. I don't know how the ring didn't break. Like there was, if I had to guess, Jay, there was what 25 to 40 people in that ring by the end of it, including a young Natalia and a young Tyson Kidd.
Yeah, and a young Harry Smith and a young Georgia Smith as well, and plenty of other friends and family, of course. Yeah, you can't put this match over enough, especially in terms of a tag team match. I mean, can you imagine if Survivor Series matches had this kind of heat? It'd be incredible. We would be talking about Survivor Series and maybe a different kind of breadth than we do now in terms of being one of the big top 4 or top 5 tentpole events for WWF. But this match, again, was adding fuel to the fire. It was a perfect way to set up the upcoming SummerSlam card. The Canada versus America angle was at its zenith at this point. So, Owen Hart getting the win over Steve Austin, which would set up the match coming up at the SummerSlam pay-per-view with Owen Hart putting up the Intercontinental Championship. And of course, if Steve Austin lost, then he had to kiss Owen Hart's ass and all this kind of stuff. So all of these matches are part and parcel into getting us to where we're going to go. And for that, we go back to what we alluded to at the beginning of the show, which is all about story. I mean, this is long-term storytelling. I mean, you can even go back to the roots of this match here, the Canadian Stampede. None of that would have worked as well had we not had what we got in 1993 and 1994 and those years of building up this rivalry and relentlessly on commentary, always talking about how Owen was, admiring Bret and jealous of Bret and this and that. And so when you finally see them come together after years of tension and sibling rivalry, to have them come together as a team and then, of course, form the Hart Foundation and run roughshod over the Federation for the better part of 1997, it was incredible and immediately elevated Owen as well from being somebody who wasn't doing a ton in 1996 to now be becoming Intercontinental Champion, which is, as we all know back in this era, a shade away from being the world champion. And you also have to remember at this time as well, he was still carrying the tag team championships until the latter part of the summer of 1997 as well, when they lost to Steve Austin and Dude Love. So these guys were carrying all the gold. Going into SummerSlam 1997, they were the hottest heels in the company, and they were poised to run roughshod over SummerSlam as well.
Now, can that just lead us right into SummerSlam 97? Are we cool to get into that?
Absolutely.
Now, this storyline, so going into SummerSlam 1997, you have Stone Cold Steve Austin challenging Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. It was going to be an incredible match, and then a freak accident happened. Austin went to take a tombstone pile driver from Owen. Instead of going to his knees, he went to his ass. Austin's head was exposed, and it broke his neck, right? Or did it give him a stinger or fuck up a vertebrae? Or did he actually fully break it?
It bruised his spinal cord.
Which is still not good at all. So Austin was pretty much paralyzed in the ring for a moment, and Owen realized, kind of did what he could, was showboating to the crowd, and they end with one of the ugliest, just sloppy finishes, which I get it. You had to get it out of the way. It was just a quick roll-up where, if you go back and watch it, it's not great, but Austin was hurt, needed to get out. Austin won the title. The important thing is what happened after. You had Owen walking around with a fucking genius t-shirt that simply said, Owen 316, I just broke your neck. You want to get heat? We're going old school to I broke Wahoo's leg heat. This was genius. This was the greatest t-shirt. Jay, you know this. I am a giant merch fan. I have a lot of wrestling t-shirts. I've got probably somewhere between 100 and 150. I don't own this one, and I want it. I need to track it down. The only issue is tracking it down in fat guy sizes.
Yeah. I mean, that's, if you look back on the career of Steve Austin, I mean, obviously you never want to see anybody get hurt in the ring. And thank goodness he was safe and sound. And the most important thing coming out of this was that nobody was injured to the point of paralysis or anything like that. But if you look back on the career of Steve Austin, I think in a sense, him not being able to compete for a few months, I mean, he wouldn't wrestle again until Survivor Series 97 in a rematch with Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. This really solidified Steve Austin as an incredible character. I mean, we'd already seen how incredible he was as a character in terms of his promo skills and things of that nature. But because they had to come up with creative ways for him to be involved in the show, and he had to rely on his presence as a talker and as a great promo, this really was, I think, in a lot of people's minds, cemented Steve Austin as their guy. So I hate to say that, or shudder to think that it was a blessing in disguise, but in a sense, it allowed the audience to get a much more fervent taste of what Steve Austin was about outside the ring, as opposed to just being the ass-kicking machine that he would ultimately be. Also, the other thing to point out regarding this matchup is that you see how Steve Austin's style in the ring changed. He had been more of a technical wrestler. I mean, he was building up a brawling style at this point, but he was still doing a lot of technical moves. He hadn't quite found the move set that he was going to eventually adopt as the Steve Austin brawling brute character. So this actually forced Steve Austin's style to change to a degree as well, because he wasn't able to do as many of the moves that he would have done in years previous, just based on the damage that he had sustained to his neck. So Owen and Steve's rivalry, while the pile driver was an unfortunate incident and affected Austin for the rest of his life, ultimately helped become a great boon to Steve's career, and also elevated Owen to another level, in which he was able to go around, to your point, with the fanfare of taunting Austin relentlessly with the T-shirts and with the promos and everything else. And that leads us all the way through the fall of 1997. Owen would win the Intercontinental Championship back at Bad Blood 1997, the In Your House pay-per-view, which is notable for the first ever Hell in a Cell. And that brings us to Survivor Series 1997, which was the rematch we just alluded to a few moments ago between Steve Austin and Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. Do you have any memories of that matchup?
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't a great match, but it was exactly what it needed to be. It was Austin coming in, kicking ass, taking the title. We covered this in our archives in our very, very first episode. If you want to listen to us talk about Survivor Series 97 at length and hear all of my, as I've been told, horrible booking choices for that one, go back and listen. But I don't know, Jay, when I think Survivor Series 97, I don't really think Owen and Austin, if you know what I mean.
I think we need to talk about the Montreal Screwjob just a little bit as it pertains to Owen, in the sense that I think anybody listening to this podcast is going to have a pretty good idea of what the Montreal Screwjob means and what it was and what it meant to the wrestling industry. But I think that in terms of looking at Owen's perspective going out of Montreal and going forward, I mean, I do know that Owen did have make a couple of shots. In fact, not too far away from where you and I live, there's a place called Barrie, Ontario, and there was a Wednesday night house show the night after, or the Wednesday after Survivor Series, in which the Bulldog and Owen were defending the tag team, or rather, they weren't defending the tag team championships. They were in a tag team match, I believe, versus Steve Austin and Dude Love as the main event of that house show. So they were still doing a couple of bookings here and there before Bulldog and Neidhart and, of course, Brett would eventually leave and go to WCW. But Owen stayed, and there's a lot of conjecture in terms of why he stayed. I think a lot of people have said that he was offered a new contract to stay with more money to become the single star that he never really got the opportunity to be, being in the shadow of the rest of the Hart family, namely Brett. I don't think that that means that Brett held him down to any degree. I think it just means that when you have somebody as successful as Brett as your brother, it's a little bit harder for your cream to rise to the top, if that makes sense. So I think there's a lot of different reasons as to why Owen stayed. There's also talk that he was the one guy that Vince wouldn't let out of his contract. So I'm not really sure what the answer is after all these years. But I do know that going forward, he would have some memorable moments. What are your memories of Owen post Montreal?
I mean, Nation of Domination. That's one that stands out for me right away. Him being included in the Nation, I thought was really, 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 really strange at first. But the more they kind of explained it and how he had been screwed by everybody and not getting a fair shot, that's essentially what, like, other than the racial charges of the Nation of Domination, that was what their whole gimmick was that they didn't think that they were given a fair shot. They kept being held down by the man and all of those types of things. So it made sense for Owen to join them. And I thought that he was actually a really good fit in there. The only thing I didn't like was his caution tape all over his goddamn trunks, but I'm not here to pick about aesthetics today.
Yeah,
I think about that.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was going to say,
I think about that, and you go.
No, go ahead. I'm laying out.
I was just going to say, I think of the Nation of Domination, and I pretty much think of the tag team with Jarrett, because he had singles runs with Hunter at Mania 14, if I'm not mistaken. They had a match, but overall, like, I don't think Owen became that single superstar that, whether or not he was promised he would be or not, we'll never know. I don't think he ever reached that level.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of Owen post Survivor Series 97, I always think of when he made his return at the D-Generation X pay-per-view the month later, and he knocked Michaels off the ring apron through the announce table after Michaels had defeated Ken Shamrock. I remember the final Raw of 1997 was from Uniondale, Long Island, and it was the main event was going to be Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart for the WWF Championship. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is the night. This has to be it. I mean, Brett's gone. Brett's been screwed, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm a 14-year-old kid watching this, sitting thinking to myself, and I'm watching this match, which was an excellent match, by the way. And they had teased so many spots in this match in which Owen was going to win the title. I was convinced that this was going to happen. Owen was going to win the title. He was going to avenge his brother who was screwed over by DX. He was finally going to get his due. He was going to get the title that he so richly deserved. And it was one of the funnest viewing experiences I can remember of watching wrestling as a kid, because my belief, they had sunk me in completely. I was totally convinced and invested in this match. And when they swerved me, I was so gobsmacked by the fact that Owen didn't win the title. Now, our show is all about fantasy booking, and we would be remiss if we didn't touch on fantasy booking for just a brief second. Don't worry, folks, we're in the home stretch here. But I've always sort of thought, and you and I have discussed this previously, that as much as I love the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels feud, do you not think that there would have been something to maybe doing the main event of Royal Rumble 1998 being Owen Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the championship? Now, I'm not suggesting we have Owen versus Austin as the main event of WrestleMania 14. I think it needed to be Shawn Michaels versus Steve Austin for that match to be as successful as it was with Mike Tyson. But that main event, there was so much momentum after Montreal. I think that Owen versus Shawn at Royal Rumble would have been huge.
I mean, you're not wrong. And it also, if that was the direction that they went, it could have prolonged Shawn's in-ring career at that era too, because he's not in a casket match with Taker. He's not taking that spot that completely screws up his back. But that's all hindsight being 2020. I know we talk about rebooking everything, and yes, 100% it should have been Owen and Shawn. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you need Sean to be the one to do the honors to Austin and not have it be Owen, then why are we getting Owen in the main event of Rumble only to have him lose again? That's the other side of the coin that I can see people arguing for as well. Unless you do want to have Owen and Steve in the main event, which I think could have been wonderful. I think they would have put on a hell of a match. The story's already built in. They've had a feud essentially going on for a couple of years. I don't think it needed to be Sean like you do. I think it could have been Owen to put over Austin and then have them go at it for a while. Because once Austin won the title, it's not like there was ever a Sean rematch. You at least could have had another 2 pay-per-view matches with Owen before you went into something, and then maybe we wouldn't have gotten those terrible Dude Love Steve Austin matches. I know you
Those
like them, but I
terrible.
don't. Yeah, they were. I'm sorry, they were.
I don't think
But
they were.
I honestly think it should have been, it should have been Owen and Sean. Owen should have won, and then Owen should have dropped the title to Austin at Mania 14. So, I mean, if I'm rebooking 14 ever down the line, we know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, no, it was just, I figured we needed to get a little bit of rebooking in, just a micro rebook, just to get it in there for the concept of our show. But yeah, I think that you actually make a good point, because I don't think that Owen, as much as I love Owen, I don't think Owen would have been the guy to main event versus Austin. I think it needed to be Sean versus Steve. I think it just made more sense. It's more marquee. No offense to Owen, but at that time, it was the more marquee match. So if that's the logic, then I do understand why they didn't main event with Owen and Sean. But I just do think that there was something to that. There was definitely a missed opportunity somewhere there, I feel like, to make it bigger. Even if you had maybe done that match on Raw, but promoted it for 2 or 3 weeks instead of just having it announced at 9:00 and having it go on at 10:45 kind of thing. So. But, with that being said, I really feel like the height of Owen Hart's career has been chronicled in our discussion today. So I want to steal a page from our buddies over at the Counted Out 7 podcast. They typically, after they do their list, like to kind of rattle through some honorable mentions. And I don't know if you have any handy. I know that you have a list of bullet points. If we haven't touched on some of them, maybe you want to say them now. I have a few as well. As far as Owen's career post 1998, when he kind of did the Shawn Michaels thing, and then he had that run with Triple H for the European title, like you alluded to, at WrestleMania 14, and then going into the spring of 98, where he joined the nation that was being led by The Rock at this point. There isn't nearly as much to talk about with Owen Hart than there was in the years previous, which we just covered. So are you good with just maybe running through some bullet points and some honorable mentions of things you'd like to talk about? And then we can kind of give our final thoughts about Owen and his career and impact on us. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great. I mean, I only have 2, so I don't know how many you have.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go, and then I'll jump in.
So my 2 are going to be the return of the Blue Blazer after Owen storyline quit the company, and then as soon as he quit, the Blazer's back, and it's going back to what we talked about last week on our episode with Mr. America and Hulk Hogan. You know it's Owen, but you can't prove it. He's doing the mannerisms. He's throwing his arms in the air going, woo! You know it's him, but again, there's no proof. I thought that was fun. And the other one that I have here is his feud with Ken Shamrock, and I believe Dan Severn was involved in it as well, where they had like the Lions Den match. They had the match in the Hart family dungeon. I thought that was cool just because it was completely different. And really, you'd never had cameras in there before.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I was going to mention. I really enjoyed that, especially because it was actually at the dungeon. So it wasn't like some kind of studio recreation or what have you. It was actually filmed in Stu Hart's basement. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was something really fresh, I think ahead of its time as well. Same thing with the Lions Den match. I mean, those Lions Den matches, I think they did 2 or 3 of them. They did one on Raw with Shamrock versus Vince. And if I'm not mistaken, they did one at SummerSlam 99 with Shamrock versus Blackman. But this was the first one. It was at the theater portion of Madison Square Garden. which is where they have a lot of concerts and things of that nature. So it was kind of a cool concept. It was kind of a rip-off or a take on the UFC Octagon. Again, ahead of its time. I thought it was really neat. And the feud was quite good. I mean, you weren't going to get a bad match out of Owen, obviously. And then, of course, Shamrock. Shamrock was a really solid worker. A lot of people don't know that he was trained to be a pro wrestler. He was a worker before he got into UFC. So he had a lot of experience working matches before he came in as that special guest referee at WrestleMania 13 and then foisted into a spot on the roster. So you were going to get some really solid matches and solid outings out of those two. And I thought it was a fun feud for sure.
Oh yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me. That's why they're on my honorable mentions. But I'm curious as to what you have, because I just learned something new listening to you there. I didn't know that Shamrock and Vince had a Lions Den match, and I'm probably going to track that down and see what kind of a dumpster fire that would be.
It was on a, if I'm not mistaken, it was on a Monday Night Raw. It was Raw in, it would have been, I guess, spring of 1999. It was right after Vince revealed himself as the higher power that they had a Raw where Shamrock would face Vince in the Lions Den. I'm fairly certain that was the case. But my honorable mentions, there's one match that really comes to mind that I absolutely adore. It's very seldom talked about, and it's from In Your House Breakdown from Hamilton, Ontario in September of 1998, and it was Owen Hart versus Edge, and this was Edge's second pay-per-view appearance on WWF pay-per-view or WF television. It was such a fun match. Of course, here in Canada, we have the CFL, which is Canadian Football League, and we had the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They were a team that was in Hamilton, which is about a 30-minute or 40-minute drive away from Toronto. And then, of course, we have the Toronto Argonauts, which is their great rival because they're so close in proximity. So, of course, Owen Hart comes out with a Toronto Argonauts jersey. It's the oldest gimmick in wrestling. You come out and you completely denigrate the hometown sports team and wear the opposite team's jersey. It's always instant heat. Just classic Owen. Didn't come out and say a word, was just wearing that jersey. The match was super well worked. I remember the most memorable spot for me was when Owen caught Edge coming off the top rope and power slammed him on the outside of the ring on the protective mats. And the splat that you heard, that sound was just, it's embedded in my mind. It was a phenomenal match. It was a great little matchup. And then, of course, talking about Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, I think that we have to give credit to that tag team. They were both, second generation performers that were really phenomenal in-ring technicians. I mean, Jeff Jarrett doesn't get nearly the credit I think he deserves in terms of how well he worked in the ring. And so these two guys together were really phenomenal partners for each other. They were great kind of playing off of each other's strengths. Owen was a little bit more of a high flyer than Jarrett, but Jarrett maybe was a tad bigger, so he might have had more of the power. I'm not really sure exactly if you could break it down in terms of power versus speed, but they were both just great workers, and it was a fun tag team. Deborah was involved there as well. And then, of course, we talked about the Nation stuff was great too. I really enjoyed the Nation stuff. We saw a couple of times in the summer of 98. We saw, Owen and Rock taking on Undertaker and Steve Austin for the tag titles on Sunday Night Heat or something like that. So those are my kind of honorable mentions when it comes to Owen Hart post Survivor Series 97. I don't think there's a ton to talk about in terms of Owen and Jeff's run. I don't really want to get too far into 1999. We are not going to touch on any of the negativity that happened with Owen, and we're not going to talk about his passing. Really, we all sort of know what the story is at this point. Anybody listening again to this podcast is very much aware of what happened. So we're here to celebrate Owen.
Now,
and go ahead.
One thing we didn't touch on that it just dawned on me right now, to be perfectly honest with you. Owen Hart has had some of the best theme musics ever. Like his early, or I guess mid 90s one when he was the King of Hearts. That one is my favorite. But then when he did the Enough is Enough and It's Time for a Change one, like Owen never had bad entrance music. And to me, I don't want to say entrance music is important, but it kind of is. Like it makes you get jacked up for the character. And his always did that to me. It was perfect for him. Every single thing that he had for him was so suited for him. It was done incredibly well. I think that that's just Jim Johnson being the phenomenal composer that he was. But let's just give a little props to his theme musics as well.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, Jim Johnson was a musical genius. I don't care what anybody says in any form of music, any genre. I mean, I think a lot of Jim Johnson's themes can stand up next to some of the giants of music, in my humble opinion. So, you know what? What the hell? We got a couple of seconds here before we're going to close. Before you give me your final thoughts on Owen and how you feel about him and his impact on your life and all that kind of thing, rank Owen Hart's theme songs for me.
How many did he have?
Well, okay. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll do it first, and then we'll see if you would agree with me or disagree with me. So, number one is the high energy theme.
Oh, okay.
You know, the one that he had for the majority of his run, that he had when he was facing Brett and when he went into the 96.
Was that actually the theme for High Energy, though?
Yes.
I did not know that.
It was indeed.
Well, yes, that is my number one as well. So far we are agreeing.
Okay. And then number two, I'm going to go with the Enough is Enough and It's Time for a Change, but the Nation version of it.
Agree.
Number three, I'm going to go with the first version of the Owen Hart theme that he had post the High Energy theme, where it had the European sounding ambulance sirens at the beginning.
Disagree.
Okay. What do you have for number three?
Original Blue Blazer.
Ooh, that's a good one. I was going to put that at 4. And then, of course, we have the last one would be either, you'd have the Enough is Enough and It's Time for a Change with the aforementioned theme that was the one post High Energy. And then, of course, you'd have, I guess, Jeff Jarrett's theme would be as the tag team. So I think we're pretty much on the same page. Blue Blazers theme is right up there. And, of course, I guess you have to include Bret Hart's theme as part of the Hart Foundation. That's got to be up there too, right?
Yeah, that's bottom for me.
Yeah, of course it is. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to let you take the floor here. Why don't you just briefly tell us how you feel about today, how you feel about talking about Owen, and what impact he had on you, and where you stand on his legacy, and how you feel about everything we covered today.
I mean, we wouldn't be doing this show 22 years after the man passed away if he didn't leave a lasting impression on both of us. I grew up watching him. Unfortunately, when he had his untimely accident, I was only 12 years old, which is really, really weird to think. But I didn't grow up like Owen Hart wasn't a wrestler in my adult life, but I feel like he was because I watched so much of his stuff. To this day, when I need something on the WWE network that is just going to put me in a good mood or anything like that, I'm not going to lie, I'm searching Owen or Eddie Guerrero. Those are my go-tos. So I would say that Owen has has been very significant to my wrestling fandom. I have sealed Owen Hart action figures in my collection. I have one of them autographed. I'm a big Owen fan. I know we're not going to touch on anything bad, but the only thing I do want to say is Dark Side of the Ring on Owen Hart was fantastic. Gave everybody a different perspective of it. Yeah, I think that what we've done today and just kind of hanging out, being two buddies, talking about somebody that we admire and respect like Owen Hart, I think we did all right. I'm sure that there are people who could do better. There are definitely people who could do worse. But, Jay, I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel as though, again, this show wasn't meant to be sort of like this blow by blow chronological covering of Owen's career. I mean, of course, we did talk about the higher points of his career, I think from 90, latter part of 93 all the way through until 98 was kind of like the sweet spot for Owen's career. We could have done this completely differently and, had a full script of things we were going to follow. We didn't want that this week. We really wanted to be organic and come across as two guys that were, again, sitting at the bar, having a couple beers, talking about Owen Hart or just talking on the phone. And this is very similar to how Tyrone and I talk, in our real lives. So we wanted to come across as if we're having a conversation about him, and maybe you're sitting at the table across from us and overhearing our conversation type thing. So I hope that we reached our goal, and we hope that you folks really enjoyed this presentation. As far as my lasting memories, I think that it all ties into our reasoning for doing this podcast in the first place, that we both have such fond memories of events past, and specifically for you and I think our childhood memories of wrestling and what it meant to us growing up and in through our teenage years and into our adulthood. I think that I'm exactly the same as you. I tend to, when I've had a lousy day, or on a Friday night when I want to unwind with a couple of drinks or what have you, many times I end up putting on WWE Network and watching something from my childhood or something that brings me great joy. And oftentimes that's something that includes, a Hart family member, Owen Hart, Bulldog, Bret Hart. But Owen Hart always has a special place in my heart, no pun intended. And I'm right there with you in terms of loving to go back and relive that stuff. And it's hard to believe, like you said, it's hard to conceptualize that he's been gone for as long as he has been, because I think for you and I, we've come to this realization almost through doing this podcast today that he really does live on through the memories that we have of him. I mean, of course, I wish we had gotten to see more of him. And of course, for his family, we wish that he had stayed around. But I'm just so grateful for all the memories I have of him. I'm grateful. That's really what I'm taking away today, is as grateful as I was before we started, I'm even more grateful today for having Owen in our lives at some point, and the wonderful legacy he left us as wrestling fans. And just one last thing as a sidebar, because you said we're not going to talk about, negative things. And I don't want to get into negative things either. You touched on Dark Side of the Ring. And my biggest takeaway from that was, for anybody listening to this, that's, come Hall of Fame time gets a little bit perturbed that Owen Hart's not in the Hall of Fame, or maybe is irritated that he's not in there, or thinks that for some reason that the Hart family should let Owen be in the Hall of Fame. Just my only thing would be to just leave them alone. They've been through enough. They've tried to pick up the pieces as a family. The internet community has done enough to try to villainize Martha Hart for not putting Owen into the Hall of Fame, putting him into a situation where a company that was negligent, and in their negligence was part of the reason that Owen passed away. She doesn't want to have that company profit off of his name. So I think that anybody who villainizes Martha Hart for not putting Owen in the Hall of Fame needs to, in your famous words, Tyrone, grow the hell up.
Amen, brother. Amen. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that pretty much does it for our Owen episode, though, right, bud?
It sure does. Doesn't mean we won't talk about Owen again, but of course we will.
Well, I can tell you that we won't be talking about him on the next thing that you're going to rebook. And boy, do I have a fun one for you.
Well, let's see.
We're going to do something a little different here. And about, I think it was 3-ish years ago, we had a video released. So I'm going to get you to rebook how you would direct Tammy Sitch in her Vivid Entertainment adult video.
Okay. Well, you know what? I can do that right now for you. I would have done it in 1996.
Fair enough. No, in all realness, you are going to be going back to a year that you may have been watching. I really wasn't. It was kind of in that gray area for me. We're going to go back to May the 20th, 2012. It's the PNC Arena, and we are doing WWE Over the Limit. Which I don't know if
2012.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it is headlined by John Cena taking on John Laurinaitis.
Why are you doing this to me?
Because it's so much fun.
Nobody cares about 2012.
Well, I'm sure that there are people out there that do. You and I just really don't.
Yeah.
But it's an era we really haven't touched on, so I thought, what the hell? Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is literally Tyrone, folks, for full disclosure, before we went on the air, said, do you want me to tell you what you're booking, or do you want me to just surprise you, spring it on you on the air? Easy for me to say. And I said, no, just surprise me. And boy, howdy, was I surprised. Okay. Well, this should be okay. Well, I will rebook this. Sure. I have sent you on a couple of Missions Impossible in the past. So yeah, no problem. I will rebook 2012 WWE, and I will have a darn good time doing it too. So anyhow, thank you very much for that, my friend. Thank you for the fun event to cover next week. Look forward to that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to this very special edition of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. We will be back to our traditional format next week. Tyrone, I know I speak for you when I say that we were honored to be able to do this episode today and pay homage to one of our favorites and somebody who has an incredibly lasting legacy in the wrestling business. So for myself, for Tyrone, for the Hart family, for Owen Hart, and for all those fans out there that continue to hold Owen in close proximity to their own hearts, the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast thanks you very much.
Goodbye, everybody.